All right, hi everyone. Welcome to another class with Singer Sewing and Michaels. My name is Bethany. I'm so excited to be back here for another class this month. I do have some people helping in the chat, so if you have questions, don't hesitate to utilize the chat for that. If you don't want to see the chat, you can minimize that as well. If you're having technical issues, there's Maria who will help with that, and you can message her directly. And then I also have a couple of people from my team at Singer that are in the chat as well. I have Amy Mulraney, which will be dropping links to things that I'm going to show you guys today. I have Amy McMullen and Sonny Grant, who are also going to help with any sewing related questions. And if there's something that I need to show or repeat, they'll let me know, and I'll do that here on the camera. But I hope you guys are having a wonderful, wonderful day. I'm tuning into you guys from my home studio here in Nashville, Tennessee. And I would love to know where you guys are watching from, so let us know in the chat. We usually get people from all over, so it's really fun to see that. It's neat how technology can bring our little sewing community together here with Michaels today. So today's class, if you did not know this when you signed up, today's class is all about buttons and buttonholes. And if you want to learn how to sew buttons and buttonholes, you're in the right place. There's going to be a lot of information shared with you all today, some great tips and tricks as well. So I recommend having a pen and piece of paper handy to take some notes. We're also going to give you a lot of links and things to help once this class is over, like reference guides and things like that. So I'm going to go over all of that in a minute, but let's see who all is tuning in. Hi from, oh my goodness, from all over. Hi, everyone. And I see Amy's introducing herself to everyone as well. So if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. As I mentioned, like I said, I have a lot of stuff to share with you all today. And one of the reasons I wanted to teach a buttons and buttonhole class specifically, and this is a demonstration class, is because we had a lot of great feedback from our last demonstration class on zippers. And I feel like zippers are one of those things where people are really intimidated and scared to do it and try to avoid projects that have zippers. And I feel like people kind of feel the same way about buttons and buttonholes. I hear that a lot in the sewing community. So today I'm hoping that what I share with you all will give you some confidence to try to practice and overcome your fear of buttons and buttonholes. So that's the goal. We conquered our fears with zippers. If you missed that, you can tune into those. They're on Michael's YouTube channel. This one is recorded. So if you want to reference back to this when you decide to attempt some buttons and buttonholes, this will be saved and show up on Michael's YouTube channel probably tomorrow. I believe it takes about 24 hours. All right. So buttons and buttonholes. There's a lot of information, and I want to start by telling you all what machines I'm going to be showing you all today. The one I'm going to sew on today is a heavy duty 6700C, which is available at Michael's. I really love using computerized sewing machines for buttonholes because I have a lot more to choose from. So that's why I chose this machine today for today's class. But I do have another one behind me. This is our Fashion Mate 5560. It is also a computerized machine, but this one has some different buttonhole options and different steps that you need to take when sewing buttons. So I wanted to have the two to show you different processes a little bit and different options in case one of these is more like the machine you have, or if you're shopping for a machine, this might help you make some decisions on which one you might want to, things you might want to keep an eye out for when you're shopping for a new sewing machine. All right, so I think what I'm going to start with first is just the different types of buttonholes, because there's a lot and not everybody knows what all of these different buttonholes do. We're familiar with the main one on the machine, right? The square buttonhole, and we're familiar with that one, but there are a lot of other ones, and I think it's worth mentioning and pointing those out because you need to make sure that you're choosing the right buttonhole for your project and the material you're sewing. So I'm going to switch over to this camera real quick, and I'm going to do my best to show you all my little thing here. Now, what I love about these heavy duty computerized machines is our little guides that slide out. So we have two on the 6700C, and they're categorized in different folders. So in folder 2 is where you're going to find our buttonholes, and then other decorative stitches. And then folder 3 is more more decorative stitches, and folder 4 is our letter stitches. So I love these because they're easy to pull out and reference, but they just slide away and tuck away, and I don't have to see them when I don't need them. So I'm going to show you this one right here, and we're going to kind of go over some of these different buttonholes and then what you might use them for. And while I go over this, I'm going to ask that Amy drop a link to our stitch reference guide that you can find on singer.com. A lot of people, I'm going to switch back while I'm talking to you. A lot of people don't realize that on singer.com, we have a lot of reference information for you. So there's a whole stitch reference guide. It's got pictures of all the different types of stitches, some that your machine may have and some that it may not. So you can go there, look at those different stitch pictures, click on them, and then it'll tell you what it's called, what it's used for, and some tips on how to successfully use that stitch. So it's a great reference guide. So like I said, I'm going to share with you what these different buttonholes do and what they're called and what they're used for, but I don't expect you to remember all of that. And we've got a great guide. She just dropped it in the chat for you. So be sure to save that link so that after the class, you can put that as a bookmark, that as a favorite. And it's great, not just for the buttonholes, but for any type of decorative stitches or constructive stitches. We have all of that reference there. All right, so we're going to start here, and I hope you guys can see this as best as you can. Stitch number 12, and I'm going based off the ones that are on the 6700C, the heavy duty computerized machine that I'm showing you today. So stitch number 12 is the round end buttonhole, and this is pretty straightforward. It's a standard buttonhole, but has a rounded end here, and this is commonly used for lightweight to medium weight woven fabrics. The one next to it is a round end bar tack. And basically what that means is, see how this end, the stitches are going the same direction as the sides, and this one, it's going the other direction. And you may not be able to see that. I'm going to try to get you as close as I can, but it's a little tricky. Let me just move the machine. There we go. Maybe that helps. All right. So this one has a little bar tack at the back. And this is, again, used for lightweight to medium weight fabrics and woven fabrics. This number 14 here is a keyhole buttonhole. And basically that just means that there's an opening at the end that's round and a little bigger. And this one is specifically used for tailored jackets, coats, and outerwear when you have maybe a bulkier fabric that you want, or I'm sorry, not fabric, a bulkier button or a decorative button, or even a shank button that you want to be able to fit through a buttonhole. So that's why it's a little wider at the bottom. And 15 is an heirloom buttonhole. It's pretty much the same style, but it has that bar tack at the end. And this is better used for finer fabrics. It helps with the stability of the buttonhole. Now, when doing these different buttonholes, you also need to know what type of stabilizer or interfacing that you need to use. So again, that stitch reference guide is going to be extremely helpful in letting you know what to use. And we'll talk a little bit more about stabilizers and interfacing in a second. Over here was stitch number 16. This one is a keyhole buttonhole with a pointed end. This is really commonly used for tailored garments. It's a little dressier, and that's why. 17 is going to be one that a lot of people are, if you sew with garment sewing for knits or stretchy fabrics, you're definitely going to want to utilize this this buttonhole because it is a stretch buttonhole. So it's meant for light and medium weight knit fabrics that have a stretch. And what you probably can't see here is it's got a little bit of a longer stitch length on that zigzag going down the sides so that the buttonhole will stretch with the fabric. 18 is going to be a bar tack stitch. This is for reinforcing areas that get a lot of stress or use, like belt loops and around pockets. And then 19 is what's called a darning stitch. And this stitch is actually, it's completely filled in here, and it's meant to use for repairing holes or tears. And you set the size of this stitch with your buttonhole foot. So it's going to fill in this whole area, but it's going to repair those tears and holes. This little circle one right here, number 20, is an eyelet stitch. This is really most commonly used for embellishments, decorative. It's fun to kind of play around with this one. You can use it and then poke the little hole through, and people run ribbon through it or decorative threads. It's a lot of fun to use. And then number 21 here is what's called the button sewing stitch. I will show you how to set your machine to sew on a button without having the stitch, but this stitch is also used for tacking, like a tack stitch. So if you need to tack things down, people sometimes use this in quilting as well. So it's a great little tacking stitch, and it's just going to go back and forth. All right. Any questions about those on this machine? Let me see. Use it to sew a button and a buttonhole. I am not familiar with that specific model, but I would say yes. And it looks like Sonny's already giving you that information. So I'm just gonna let them run this chat until they tell me I need to intervene. While they're doing that and answering your question, I am gonna come over here to this machine. And this is the Singer Fashion Mate 5560. As I mentioned at the beginning of class, this one has a few different buttonholes that I wanted to point out to you. Just so you can visually see what they are and how they look different from machine to machine. Okay, so let me switch over here and make sure you guys can see this clearly. All right, it's as clear as it's probably going to get. All right, so the first three, 90 obviously is going to be your button sewing or tack stitch. It's what we had on the previous machine we just talked about. But 91, 92, and 93 are what is called a manual buttonhole, and it's each steps to manually do a buttonhole. So you would actually do all three steps to create a buttonhole step by step. 94 is going to be what's a wide bar tack buttonhole. This is used for medium to heavyweight fabrics. And then 95 is just the narrow version of that, more specifically used for light to medium weight fabrics. 96 and 97 are keyhole buttonholes. One is a wider one and one is a more narrow one. Again, for me, the wider one's for medium to heavyweight fabrics, and the narrow one is for light to medium weight fabrics. 98 is going to be your wide round end hole, and 99 is your narrow round end hole. And again, the wider, the better for medium to heavyweight fabrics, and the skinnier, the better for light to medium weight fabrics. So now you've seen two different kind of versions of some of the buttonholes that are available on different machines. So I wanted to make sure you all had a visual aid for that. And I'm going to fix this real quick. I think I'm spinning it. Me turning it around made it come right off the edge of my table. So let me just tack this back down 1 second. How are we doing? So I'm showing you two different machines today. One is white and one is gray. This one back here is white. This is the Fashion Mate 5560. And then my heavy duty over here, which I'm going to turn my camera around so you guys can see it, is a gray heavy duty machine. So let me, and excuse my boxes in the background. That's to hold my camera up high. I'm super fancy today. So this is my heavy duty that I'm using today. It's the 6700C, and my heavy duty is going to be one of the gray machines, as we call them. So yeah, that's the difference between the two. All right. Someone asked if the background behind me is real or Zoom filter. It is real. This is my studio, little pill and stick wallpaper, and I hung up one of my little Halloween rugs just to add some spooky flair to today's class, since we're not doing something Halloween or fall-esque. We're just talking about buttons and buttonholes. All right, so now we kind of understand buttonholes. Something to keep in mind when you're sewing buttonholes is supporting or stabilizing your fabric. Even if you're sewing with a denim, you still need a stabilizer to support your buttonhole. And the reason is these buttonholes are getting a lot of, and I'm going to reference my shacket here, your buttonholes are getting a lot of movement because you're putting a button through them, and then they're getting tugged on and everything. So they need to have some stability when you create them so that they last and hold their shape and they don't get all puckered and funky looking, okay? You can also use things like interfacing. And so if you're using a softer fabric or even in knit fabric, you're probably going to want to use an interfacing instead of a tearaway stabilizer that's thicker. And there are different weights of interfacing, which I've already pressed this one on here for the sample. And this is a very lightweight interfacing. Honestly, with this lighter fabric, I'd probably want to use something a little heavier. But again, it's all about the use and wear, right? And then I wanted to show you that this also is really important with buttons too. So you need a support behind those buttons. We are going to talk a little bit about buttons today as well. And I'm going to show you how to sew buttons on with your sewing machine. So by the end of this class, you are no longer sewing buttons on by hand. And buttons can have different purposes. Obviously, they can be functional, like my shacket here to button it up, but they can also be decorative. And I know Amy's going to drop a link to this class that we did last October, where we did a little applique ghost. I did it on a onesie, but I also did in a bigger size for kid t-shirts or adult t-shirts, where we applique a little ghost on, and we used buttons to make his little eyes, which turned out super cute. And I love how these look, and it added a little pop of color to our shirt and to this little onesie. So if you want to know how to make this, we're going to drop a link to this class that we did last October with Michaels, so you guys can go back and make. This is a really quick, easy sew. The little onesie is from Michaels. The fabric, the buttons, everything I have here on this is from Michaels. So it's really easy to make. And I hope you guys take advantage of that. I wanted to show you all at least one project you can do using buttons. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. All right, isn't it cute? I think it's adorable. I think you could also applique this onto like a little canvas tote and put buttons on it for the eyes, or you could use, I did a canvas tote last year, and I don't have it within arm's reach, or else I would show it to you. I just thought of it. I did a canvas tote with a cauldron, and so like different size buttons would have been cute little bubbles coming out of the cauldron, but it was for, you know, collecting your candy when you're trick-or-treating. So all right, let's jump into buttonholes. Let's switch over to this machine here. I am going to show you how to set up your machine using the buttonhole foot, which I have here. And I'm going to do my best to keep this in frame. Someone holler at me if I'm getting a little cattywampus. I love using that word because the camera is backwards on my screen. So this is the buttonhole foot, and this foot comes with just about every Singer sewing machine. I know it comes with the two that I'm showcasing for you guys today. And what I love about our buttonhole foot with Singer is the fact that you can place the button in the back. So I'm going to take it out. Well, it's in there good. So you can take it out. This slides up and down. And you put your button in here and you push it down and get it nice and snug, and it holds your button there. And what it does is it's telling your button, your button is telling this foot how big your buttonhole needs to be for this button. There's no more guesswork in trying to figure out how big my buttonhole needs to be for my button. Okay, so that's what I love. I can put a tiny button in here. I can put a little bit bigger button in here. So that's a really nice feature, is it kind of takes some of the guesswork out. And just like our other feet, you press this little spring button in the back and it drops your foot, and then this one attaches the same way right here on this little bar. So I'm going to slide it in and lower my foot, and it clicks into place, and there we go. It is attached. It's going to have some movement, but that's okay. And I have just a piece of denim here that I'm going to start with because it really shows the buttonhole really well. And I do have stabilizer on the back side. This is just tearaway stabilizer, and it's peel and stick, which is really nice. So I highly recommend taking advantage of some of that. And we're going to slide this under here. Now your buttonhole is going to start closest to you, and then it's going to stitch backwards, over, down, and tack. So it's going to do that kind of motion. So just keep that in mind when you're choosing your placement of your buttonhole. Your starting point is going to be the bottom end of your buttonhole. So I'm going to lower. So I don't want to start on the edge of my fabric is what I'm saying, because then my buttonhole is not going to be on my fabric. I'm going to start in a little bit and lower my foot. Now, another important thing to know before we start sewing and stitching is there is a little bar right here, and some people forget it's there because you don't see it until you pull it down, and it says push, and it has a little image of a buttonhole on it, and it needs to sit right behind this little bar that sticks out on your buttonhole foot. And this is pretty much going to tell our machine, this is the starting point of our buttonhole, and when this bar hits this bar, that's when it needs to stop sewing the buttonhole and go back down the other side. So this is what's telling the machine to start and stop for the length of your buttonhole. Okay, does that make sense? I think we're good. I'm going to find my foot control on the floor around all my other cords, so give me just 1 second. There we go. And I'm going to drop my needle. Now I have selected on my machine, I'll show you real quick the best I can here. Okay, so we're going to select, we're on menu 1, which is this right here. And I'm going to just select the main buttonhole right here. This is the most commonly used buttonhole. And when I select it, it sets it to a default. It tells me what foot. I'm going to do my best to get you guys in here. I know there's a glare, so let me kind of block it. That tells me that I need the D foot, which is the buttonhole foot. And then it automatically tells me what my stitch settings are. You can adjust these, and we will be doing that here in a minute, but we're going to start with a 5 millimeter stitch width and a 0.4 millimeter stitch length, because I want you to see what the general automatic settings are for this buttonhole right here. Okay, so let's switch back over here, and I'm just going to start sewing. Now, this little thread right here gets in the way, and to help with that, I do like to stop. I'm using the foot control, by the way. I'm not using the start stop. You can if you want, but I like to stop and clip my little thread here so it doesn't get caught in my buttonhole, and that way it looks nice and pretty. I'm just going to keep going. You see, it stopped it. It's going to come back down that same side. It's going to do a little tack across the bottom and then go back up that same side with a zigzag stitch. And then it's going to tack over to the other side, come down. It's going to tack the bottom and then zigzag all the way back up. When it gets to the other end, it will do a couple of tacks and it'll be done. There we go. So that was nice and quick and easy. And I'm just going to lift my foot, and I'm going to pull this off and trim my threads real quick. And there is our little buttonhole. How cute. All right, so I am going to tilt this down for just a second so you guys can see if I can. Sorry, I know we're doing a lot of movement with the cameras today, but I have 3 and they need to go in a lot of directions. All right, so I'm going to trim my little thread.
Stephanie, when you get a minute, sorry,
Yeah.
Sonny, can you just put the foot back on and off again, just really quick?
Absolutely. I am going to show how to do that again because I have some other ones I'm going to show.
Perfect.
But I will definitely make sure to showcase that and try to get it from a couple of angles. All right, so I have my buttonhole here. Let me, whoop, where am I going? Oh, here we go. All right, sorry guys. I have my buttonhole here, and there's a couple of ways that you can open this buttonhole. You can fold it and use scissors and snip it. But there's a fun little tool that I recently got, and it just gives you a nice clean edge. It's a little chisel, and this is commonly used for slicing open in between so that you don't accidentally tear you don't want to cut any of your threads. Okay, and I have a little mat underneath because this is extremely sharp, and I know that there's different brands of these, but you just have to press and you can hear it slice, and it's great for like thicker fabrics like denim, which can be kind of hard to cut open. There we go. So I did that, and look at how clean that opening is, nice and clean. Now, if you want to prevent this from fraying at all, you could take a little fray check and put it in there, and that would be a fantastic idea, especially if it's a button hole that is going to be used a lot. So yeah, definitely add a little fray check in there. It dries clear. See, as I touch it, it starts to fray, but it's a nice, clean, crisp, straight line. And that's what I love about that little chisel tool. So that's something that a lot of people who are starting out with buttons and buttonholes don't realize is out there in the sewing world. But this is a nice little mini. You just need to be very careful and be sure you're using a little hard mat underneath it to protect your surface. All right, so let's take the buttonhole foot off and put it back on again. And I'm going to try to get you guys in a little closer. I'm sorry if you guys are getting a little seasick here, but I want you guys to be able to see and help everybody out today. Okay, I can only move this little arm so many times. So, or so much. Which way am I going here? All right, I'll just move my machine. I think that's going to be easier than trying to keep moving the camera. All right, so I am going to raise this back up for now. Okay, and on the back of the ankle back here, and I know it's going to be hard to see from your angle. Let's see here. This works better. Well, there we go. On the back here, this little spring, push that, and it drops my foot. Okay, it's the way that our feet attach and detach onto the ankle of the sewing machine. Okay. And then right here is where the foot is going to attach. So the bulk of the foot is going to be behind the ankle. Some of it might even be hanging off the end of the machine. That's okay. It's going to feel backwards at first until you get used to it. So I'm going to bring it around. I'm going to line that bar up right up under my ankle here where I detached it. And I'm going to lower the foot, or the ankle really. And we're just going to shift it around until it clicks. There it goes. It clicks right into place. When you hear it click, you know it's attached and you can lift your foot just like that. Okay. It's going to have a little wobble here. That is perfectly normal. And yeah, we can stitch out another one real quick while we've got it lined up. So let's put some more fabric in here. I'm going to lower this one. And this time I'm going to pick a different one. Let's do, and I've moved all my machine around, so I don't think I can show you guys on the camera which one I'm going to do, but I'm going to, let's see here. Let's pick, I'm going to go to a different menu and pick number 12. This is, just so you guys know, the round end buttonhole commonly used for light to medium weight woven fabrics. It's going to look just like this one, but with a rounded end down here. It's not going to look a whole lot different, but we're gonna give it a go and see how it goes. Okay. Now my little threads over here in the way. All right, I like to stop and get my little thread out of the way. And the little seam ripper, the sharp point of a seam ripper or a stiletto is perfect for doing that. And then you want to take your little snips and snip as close as you can. There we go. And we'll keep going.
Bethany,
Yes.
do you have that lever down again for this type of buttonhole?
This is why Sonny is tuning in because I forgot that step. Yes. So we want to make sure that we put that little lever down so it knows when to stop, or else this would have been the longest buttonhole ever. Thank you, Sonny. Sometimes my nerves of doing these live classes cause me to forget some things sometimes. So this is why I'm so glad to have people helping me in the background for when I have a forgetful moment. All right, I'm going to stop real quick and I want to see if I can turn this so you guys can see, there we go, better what's coming down through here. So now it's going to do the other side. as it goes back up, you'll be able to see how it's more of a rounded end versus the square end over here. There we go. So I hold the presser foot down until it stops stitching. It's not going to keep going. And now I'm going to lift my little bar up and trim my threads. All right. So now we have a little round one to go with our square one. So you see the slight difference. Let me tilt this down so you guys can see a little better. There we go. We have the round one and the square one. And just for fun, I'll slice this one open so you guys can see what it looks like. It's an open buttonhole. I highly recommend you cut some scraps like I've done today, some scrap material, put some interfacing or tearaway stabilizer on the back, and play with different stabilizers and interfacing so you can see the differences and how they impact the stability of the buttonholes, and just stitch out all the different buttonholes that come on your machine. How nice that looks. I haven't trimmed these threads, but see how nice it looks with this stabilizer. If I didn't have this stabilizer, then it would be all like wrinkled and puckered, and it would look kind of like that, to be honest. But the stabilizer definitely helps give it a nice, flat, easy looking, smooth looking buttonhole. All right. Any other questions about that? Attaching the buttonhole foot and stitching out a buttonhole. Now I did want to show with you guys real quick. Let me reposition some cameras here. I don't know what this is going to look like when I switch it.
While you're doing that, Bethany, the question came up as, does the machine know when the buttonhole is done, or is that the user? And I think you kind of said it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's the machine, and that's what takes some of the guesswork out of it. When you put, I'm going to take this off real quick. When you put your buttonhole or your button here, it tells it the size, and when you drop that lever that I forgot to do, Basani reminded me the second time, it knows when to start and stop. Okay, so it's going to stitch out the whole buttonhole for you as long as you are pressing on the foot control. If you want to let the machine do it and not press the foot control, you can. And you can, if your machine has a start stop button like this one, you can do that as well. I think some of them you have to unplug the presser foot to use the start stop. So if it doesn't work, that's probably why. Just unplug the presser foot, hit the start stop, or hit the start. It'll stitch out the whole thing. It'll stop for you. But I didn't do that. I was using the presser foot on the floor and or the foot control, and it stopped. I could keep holding down the foot and it was not going to stitch anymore. It stopped for me. Okay, so it's really nice that you don't have to go, is it done yet? Is it done yet? I like using the foot control because then I can stop and remove that thread when I'm getting started so it doesn't get in the way and cause a mess. So yes, it will stop for you. All right, so there is some nice features when it comes to these buttonholes. Is they come preset with standard size, but they're adjustable. At least most of them are. So I'm going to show you how to adjust them, and then I'm going to show you why you might want to adjust them. And we're going to do a really fun one with cording. And I intentionally picked out this one because it's going to show up on camera. And typically you would pick a cording to match your thread, to match your fabric. But I'm going to show you why and how to use cording in your buttonhole. And this is one that I feel like a lot of people don't realize you can do. And so we're going to talk about that today because it can really give a lot of stability to your buttonhole, especially one like on jeans that's going to be used a lot, like at the top of your jeans or pants or something. All right, so over here on the machine, we're going to select menu 1 again, and I'm going to select the standard buttonhole. So we're going to use this one. Now, as I mentioned, I am going to be doing a cording here. So you guys can see this. It's pretty thick cording. It's a fun sparkly one that I had on hand. And I know from practicing this, and this is where practicing comes in handy, is I need my stitch to be a little wider to go over this cord and not through the cord, because we're going to use it and we need to pull it tight at the end. So in order to do that, there's a stitch width and a stitch length. I'm not going to mess with the stitch length. I am going to adjust the stitch width, and I'm going to go up to a 6 millimeter stitch width instead of the standard 5 that it comes with. This machine will go up to 7. You can keep hitting it and you hear it beep because it says that's as far as it'll go. If I go back down and I'm going, oh, what is the standard? I can't remember. When I get to 5, there's a little box that shows up around it that lets me know that that's the standard. And anytime I go around that little outside of that, the little box goes away. So that's how I know. I can also click the this button again. If I don't know what the standard settings or the default settings, I guess is what I should say, the default settings are for this buttonhole, I can hit it again and it'll automatically bring it back to those default settings. No matter how much I change it, it'll bring it right back. All right, so I'm going to move this one up to 6mm stitch width and show you guys how to do a buttonhole that has cording in it. And we're going to come back over here. Now, before we go to the machine to do this, I want to show you how to set this up. Okay, so I have my button here and I'm going to cut a longer piece of this cording off. It's just easier to work with it off of the spool. And there are some notches on this foot that a lot of people don't realize are here. I'm actually going to hold this up this way. I think this might be easier to see. So on this foot, on your button foot, there is a notch at the top. See that? There's a little tab at the top right here. And then there's like 3 down here at the bottom. Okay. Can you guys see that? This is used for the cording. Did you know that those were there? You may have noticed them and not really known what they were used for. So I'm going to show you today. And this is kind of fun to do. So we're going to fold our cording in half. And I'm going to show you on here and then we're going to do it on the machine. Some people find it easier to put the cording on and then attach the foot, or and some people find it easier to do it the other way. Just practice. But you want your cord, I'm going a little loop right here at the center of my cord, and I'm going to loop it onto that little hook right here at the end. And this cord is going to run down underneath the foot, just like this. And it's going to come, if I can get it, it's going to come right between those 2 little loops, or the little hooks at the end. It's going to go right between those 3. Okay. So you can see that the cord is running right through the center, evenly spaced, and we're going to pull a little tension on it to hold it there. And so they don't get tangled. I'm going to turn this upright and we're going to attach this to the machine as best we can. And I'm going to show you how to do it when it's on the machine. It's not the most graceful and my hands may get in the way a little bit, but I'm going to try my best. And this right here, sometimes the buttonhole foot can be a little challenging to get under the ankle. That extra lift right here makes it so much easier. So don't forget you have that on these Singer machines. The extra lift is so helpful. Okay, so I'm going to pull out my thread a little bit and I'm going to take my loop. And my foot's not lowered, it's still up, and I'm going to loop this onto the back, and I'm just feeling for it, okay? And I want to make sure it's looped up underneath. Sometimes it gets caught on that bottom, you just have to kind of push it off the edge. There we go. Until they're both lined up underneath. There we go. And once you get it underneath, it helps to kind of lower the foot and hold it in place. And that way you know that it for sure is lined up. Can you guys see the 2 in there? They're evenly spaced. And before I forget, I'm just going to go ahead and lower this. I'm not ready to stitch it out yet because I don't have fabric under there, but I wanted to show you how they line up. And when I let go of that tension, see how they're not lined up, you are going to have to not tug hard, but you want to hold on to them so that they stay taut. Okay, just like that. So I'm going to lift this back up and I'm going to take my fabric and slide it under here. We're just going to do another one, same as before. Now remember, I did widen my zigzag stitch on this. I am going to pull my thread out. It's in the way. There we go. So everything's where it should be. And I'm gonna hold a lot of threads for just a second and drop my needle. Just like so. And we're gonna stitch this out. You ready? This is a fun one to practice and play around with. All right, so it's tacking, and now it's going over both sides of my cord, but not through my cord. And I chose this blue, so hopefully you guys can see it on camera. Now it's stitching down the left side of my cord on the right cord. And it's gonna tag it. And now it's gonna zigzag back and forth over the cord. Adding this cord is gonna give stability to your buttonhole, and that is the point. Now, typically, like I said before, you would use a cord that is matching your thread, so it blends in and gives it some thickness and fills in these gaps, okay? So now that we're done, I'm gonna lift my foot. And you have to unhook the cord from the back of the foot if it's not already unhooked. Otherwise, it's going to be a little hard to get it off. There we go. There we go. And now I'm going to move this stuff out of the way and show you what it looks like. All right. So this is what I have here. And this is what it looks like. So this is our full buttonhole with the cord. We've got the loop at the top and we've got the 2 strings at the bottom. And what you want to do is gently pull one end of the thread or the cord. You want to make sure it doesn't get twisted. It's a little challenging. You're going to have to hold it and go a little at a time and untwist it as you go. There we go. And you want to pull it all the way until it gets right up under that little tack. Okay. Now that it's up under that tack, this is a super stabilized and supported buttonhole. You can, depending on the thickness of the cord, and you can do this with different types of threads and cords. So again, it's totally personal preference. You can knot this off if it's a thinner, like a heavier weight thread instead of a cord. You could pull it to the back and knot it off. You can, with something thick like this, just trim it off and add a little fray check right here. And you have a very stabilized and corded buttonhole. How fun and easy was that? I see some emojis that are like shock face. I love that. That was honestly the first time I saw this. I had the same reaction. I was like, what? That's so crazy. And again, you're going to have to practice this, play around with it. The thickness of your cording is going to determine the settings that you need to adjust on your machine for the width of your buttonhole stitch. Who knew? Look, guys, how fun is that? I'm going to cut this one open real quick so you guys can see how much more stable this one is. It already just looks more stable because of the cording. And I kind of like the fun little sparkly blue cording because it just adds a little color to it, but most people wouldn't use that for a finished garment. They would use something that matches their thread. But who says we have to follow that rule, right? We can do whatever we want. That's the fun of sewing. Getting to create something that no one else has. All right, so I missed a spot. I think I got it all now. Nope. Well, there's a little hair, but that's okay. I'm going to just trim that. I want you guys to be able to see just how strong and sturdy that is. Okay. Can you see that? Compared to this one that really opens up and this one that really opens up. This one is really sturdy. How fun. Let's see here. This will be best for which type of garments. Jackets would be good. Anything that's gonna like have a lot of movement, like something like this probably could have really benefited from having a cording in it. Kids' clothes, they're not gentle with it. They're popping buttons off and ripping things out. So yeah, definitely would be helpful for some of the kids' clothes. It's very hidden, even with the blue, it's very subtle. So yeah, let me just show you guys. This is the corded one, how it holds its shape and it bounces back. This is a non-corded. This is a non-corded. So they do open a little more and you have a little more movement with them versus the corded one. But for structure and stability, that corded one is really nice. And it's the same stitch, you're just adding the cord. So it's not really too much of an extra step. It's really easy to do. What is the name of the tool to cut the buttonhole, please? This is just a little mini chisel and it's meant for cutting buttonholes. So if you just search for one of those, it came in a little kit. And I got this not too long ago and I've actually really enjoyed using it because I really struggled, especially with thicker material like this, to get a nice clean cut through the center of a buttonhole because there's not a lot of room there. So it's very sharp. Use with caution. Do not let your children use that. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, let's pull up. Everybody's asking. Yeah. Already, and it in the same little kit came with one for an eyelet that we talked about earlier that could be decorative. You do have to use like a little hammer for that one, but it just pokes the little hole out the center. So there are different ones. Mine came with both. Very helpful little tool for buttons and buttonholes, especially if you plan on doing anything with heavier fabric. Jackets for sure would be great to use that tool, and for the cording of the buttonhole. All right, so I feel like we've talked a lot about buttonholes.
And one last quick thing, Bethany, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The question is about stabilizers. Do you have a recommended stabilizer?
So today on my denim, I used a peel and stick tearaway. I have a big roll of it here. So it just tears off really easy, and it just the back peels off and sticks to it. There are tearaways that don't peel and stick that you just have to pin to your fabric. It's totally up to you and the type of material you're using. Some of the lighter weight material, or if you're sewing like a dress shirt, you're not going to want something super heavy like a tearaway fabric or a tearaway stabilizer. So you may want something like an interfacing. And depending on the material you're sewing with, you may want a light or ultra. This is an ultra lightweight interfacing. And it just presses on. I've used this a lot when doing even just a faux placket, not an actual button and buttonhole functioning placket, but actual just tacking on buttons to make it look like it would open, like you do for knit garments a lot. I have a couple dresses that I have that little buttons, like 4 buttons down the front right here, but it doesn't actually button and unbutton. They're just there for looks. But I still reinforced it with a little interfacing. You'll use interfacing a lot with button downs, with cuffs, with collars, necklines, things like that to give some stability. And this is good for wovens and knits. So you do want some mobility there. How do you get your buttonhole started in the right place on a garment? That's a great question. As I mentioned before, your buttonhole, when it starts stitching out, it's starting at the bottom of the buttonhole and it works up. Okay, so just keep that in mind. When it starts stitching, I'll show you here, it's going to start the buttonhole here and work up. So when you line up your garments, you can mark your buttons and buttonholes with what's called a sewing gauge. And I'm going to show you this. This is another little fun tool that comes in handy for making sure that your buttons and buttonholes not only align, but are evenly spaced out on your garment. And you just pull it out. So let's say you only want 4 or 5 buttons and buttonholes, and you have this much space to do it. You just keep spreading this out until they're all perfectly evenly spaced. And then you can mark it. And it makes it very easy to do so. Another trick that people will do is, especially like on a cuff or something that's folding over, they'll fold it over and they'll stitch out their buttonhole. They'll fold it over where it would button and they put a pin through the buttonhole. And then when they pull the buttonhole through that pin, the pin is left on the other side where the button needs to go. You can also use a little washable marker, a fabric marker, something like that to mark where the button needs to go in comparison to where the buttonhole is. Most people start with the buttonhole, stitch those out, and then align their buttons. Sewing gauge, yes, they're wonderful little tools. I've used them for not just buttons, but like placement of like decorative things that I wanted to embellish, but I wanted them evenly spaced. It can come in handy for a lot of different things, not just buttons and buttonholes. And, you know, like the placket, I was saying that it was just buttons, but not actual functioning buttonholes. I used this to plan out how many buttons did I want in that small space. I think I went with 3 or 4, but they were all evenly spaced and I knew where I wanted to start and stop in that area of my dress. And it was on knits and I just marked it with this. So another little handy tool that becomes very helpful with sewing buttons and buttonholes. I wonder how many times I've said buttons and buttonholes today. If I had a nickel for every time, right? All right, let's sew some buttons on. I'm going to show you guys how to do that real quick. I saved the easiest part for last. So just sit back and relax. I'm going to show you just how easy sewing buttons are with your machine. We're not going to be hand stitching buttons anymore. All right, so let me turn this machine and find my little tiny button foot. So this is the button foot right here. I'm going to hold it up. Some are blue on the end, some are clear. Yours may look a little different, but this little bottom part is more of a rubbery, so it holds your button in place. So it doesn't slip and slide. Okay, so it's a little foot and I'm going to show you how to attach it. I'm going to show you the settings you need to use it, and then we're going to sew on a button. Okay, so let's switch over here to this camera. I'm going to just move my machine into place. One second to get situated for you guys. All right, so all right. I hit too many buttons. There we go. All right, so I don't have a foot on my machine right now. I'm gonna come in a little closer. I am going to attach my button foot, but I want you guys to see that when we're attaching a button, we'll use our little red one that was in my buttonhole foot as an example. Some buttons have 2 holes. Some buttons have 4 holes, like this little guy right here. So I'm going to show you both. But the 2-hole one is the one I'm going to start with. And we want to just basically tack this back and forth in place. We're not moving the fabric through the machine. So we don't need our what's called feed dog or feed teeth. We don't need them because we're not feeding the fabric through. Okay, so in order to lower the feed dogs, there's a couple of different ways depending on your machine. So I'm going to scoot this back a little bit and over. I'm going to remove this little compartment here. Some machines have the switch right here on the front. Other machines like this one I'm using today have it on the back. So I'm going to do my best to turn. Oh, I hit a button. That's okay. I'm going to turn it around. It's down here on the back and it shows feed dogs up and feed dogs down. I'm going to slide it over to down and the feed dogs went down. Now to get them back up, if I switch this back over, you notice that they didn't come back up. Okay, they don't come back up on their own. You actually have to do 1 full stitch rotation, which I'm going to reach and do 1 full stitch rotation with my hand wheel. Well, I don't know what happened there. But anyways, that was kind of weird with my camera. All right, but as I did the stitch rotation, the feed dogs came back up. So that's how they come back up. So when you switch it back to up, if they don't come back up, it's because you need to do 1 full stitch rotation. Okay, and so I do need them down, so I'm going to lower them back down. I'm going to turn my machine back around so we can sew this together. All right, so now that my feed dogs are down, I'm going to attach my button foot. Now, some people want to put this on backwards, but I'm going to show you that you want the little rubber or the little opening to be facing towards you. Just like this. I'm going to slide it under that little metal bar, This is a little one, so you're gonna have to hold it still. Clicks into place and we're good to go. It's that simple. All right, so the next thing I need to do is set my machine to a zigzag stitch. And I'm going to switch my camera real quick. All right, so this is our zigzag stitch on this machine. Let me shift this over so you can see it better. So I'm going to select our zigzag stitch. Now it automatically defaults to some settings here, and that doesn't mean that these are what I need. It has a stitch width of 5 millimeters, stitch length of 2. Since we lowered the feed dogs, it's not, the stitch length really doesn't matter because it's not going to feed through the machine. But if you can't lower the feed dogs, you can take your stitch length all the way down. Preference. This one doesn't go down to 0. Some machines do. So again, lowering the feed dogs is going to be extremely important when sewing on a button. Okay, we just want to tack back and forth. I'm going to leave this at 5 millimeters because that's the default, but I don't know that that's going to be the right width for our button because we need it to stitch between these 2 buttonholes. You can measure. Some buttons, when you purchase them, they tell you what that width is, and you can plug that in and you probably good to go. But this came from my random jar of buttons. So I have no idea what this width is. And I know I'm not the only one that has a random jar of buttons. So we need to figure out what the width is. So in order to do that, I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to go ahead and slide my fabric under here. And I'm going to place my button, like let's pretend I marked it and this is where I need my button to go. So I'm going to place my button right up under this foot. And I'm going to do my best to straighten and center those holes in my button between the bar here. And I'm going to turn my machine so you guys can see this a little better. Okay. So I have my button right up under here and I'm going to lower the foot. My little holes are between those little rubber spots right there. Now, before I just hit the foot control on the floor and go wild, I want to actually use my hand wheel first. And the reason being is you do not want this needle to come flying down, hit your button, be in the wrong spot, not go through the hole and break your needle, break your button. That's no fun. We want to have success here. So let's set ourselves up for that by using our hand wheel. And I'm going to turn the hand wheel. By the way, the hand wheel should always be turned towards you, not away from you, towards you in a forward stitch motion. So I'm going to lower the needle and it went straight through that hole. And see how it jumped over for that zigzag stitch? I'm going to keep turning it towards me. And I'm going to take it nice and slow. And it does look like it clears both sides. So we got lucky on the first time. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes you need to adjust the width of your stitch on your machine of your zigzag stitch. But since I know that this is clearing both sides and I've done it a couple of times, I can use my foot control. And I can tack it a few times, lift my foot and remove it. Okay, there we go. And then you can pull these threads to the back and knot them off so that they're nice and pretty and they're not on the front. You would just kind of wiggle these and pull them back. See, there's one already coming to the back. It's not hard. You just need to, there's one to the back. I would just wiggle to pull that one to the back and knot them off. So that's how easy it is to attach a button with a button foot on your sewing machine. So much faster once you then hand sewing them on. It looks really pretty because the stitch is consistent back and forth. There's not a bunch of bulk behind the button. And I really like how quick it is. I know I took it nice and slow with you, but you can really knock out some buttons very quickly. Now, I think I saw someone mention that not everyone has the ability to lower the feed dogs. And I'm so glad you mentioned that because over here on the 5560, the Fashion Mate behind me that I showed you earlier, it does not lower the feed dogs. It actually comes with a little plate just like this. And it's got a couple little notches here and some holes here. And you would just pop that into place and snap it on and cover your feed dogs. Okay. If you want to see what that looks like, I'll turn this camera. Give me just a second. You know, it's a little finicky over here, but I want you all to be able to see it. We had a lot of camera movement today. All right. Can you guys see that? So I just placed this little cover right there, and then I just popped it right off with my fingernail. But yeah, it just has these little bumps and it just slides right in. So if you have one of these, it comes in your accessory kit with your machine. That's what that's for. A lot of people don't realize that, but that's what covers those feed dogs. And then you can attach a button foot and sew that on. Okay. Any questions about that? How are we doing on the questions, guys? Is there anything I need to mention?
Well, someone had a question about the 4-hole button.
Okay, I'll do one of those real quick. That was the next thing I was going to get to.
All right.
Besides fiddling with this camera today, it is just not my friend today. That's okay. Let's do a 4-hole one. Let me get my fabric here and let's pick out. Let me pick out a good one. This one's Knife Invisible. It's a fun little lime green color. So I'm going to do this one. Now, there's 2 ways to do this. It kind of comes down to preference and what you want it to look like on your garment. You can do the same back and forth stitch at the top and at the bottom, or you could go diagonal and crisscross. It's totally up to you, but it's the same steps as the 2-hole. So let's bring this guy back in here. And I don't know if this one's going to be the same stitch width or not, but we're going to give it a try. And it might be a little wider. So I'm going to let's do this. I'm going to turn this one this way this time. We're going to go back and forth and do the top and the bottom. There we go. This lime green may be a little hard to see. I am going to lower my needle. And as it shifts up and over, it's clearing it. Well, I'm just getting lucky today. I guess I kind of deserve it after this camera over here giving me all this grief. But yeah, I can go back and forth. And then I can scooch on down. And I'm not going to trust it again. I am going to, again, because of placement, make sure that I'm clear. I am a little close to that front edge, so I'm going to just scoot it back just a hair. I want the needle to kind of go through the center of these holes. There we go. All right. So there's our button. There we go. And again, I would pull these threads to the back. If you didn't want this little thread through the center, you can snip it and pull it to the back, or you can give yourself a little more tail and pull both of them back before you start the next one. So let me do another one where we're going to go the other direction. Let me do, let's see here. I'll do this one. This time I'm going to crisscross. Crisscross, applesauce. And some buttons you can do this with. Some, if they're too big, the holes get covered up by the button foot and you can't. But we're going to give it a go on this one. Let's see if it works. All right. I'm going to lower. So my needle is just grazing the edge of this buttonhole, and I know it's probably hard to see. So I'm going to widen my stitch a little bit. I just did it by 0.5 millimeter. This one seems to be doing better. I kind of want this to be a little wider, so I'm going to go up to 6 millimeters. And that seems to be doing much better. All right, so I can lift this up. I can remove the whole thing, and then I can turn it to go the other way. And again, you just have to be patient and line this up. I'm gonna lower, use my hand wheel again and turn it towards me and lower the needle. There we go. And you can tack it as many times as you want, at least 5 or so times, but see how cute that turned out? Let me see here. There we go. All right, let me switch back to this camera so you guys can see. I know I haven't trimmed my threads, so just ignore the threads everywhere. But this is a crisscross, this is a 2-hole, and this is a 4-hole back and forth. So you can see how the different direction can change the look of the button and how it's stitched on. And it's just preference, okay? So it's totally up to you how you want to do that. But we just sewed on 3 buttons very quickly, and all 3 we did a little differently. Any questions on that? Yeah, you would pull. You can wiggle these threads to the back and knot them off. I'm not going to waste your time doing that because it's kind of boring. But you would just pull the back threads and then they just pull right through. There we go. And so I got this one through. I got that one through. So we'll just do the same and you just knot them off. If you want to put a little fray check on the back to help, you can. It's totally up to you. Some people like to put a little fray check on the front just so as they get worn, the thread doesn't get fuzzy. All right, I think that is it for our class today. I'm so glad that you guys joined us and hope you feel more comfortable tackling buttons and buttonholes. Definitely check out our ghost project that we did last year using buttons. It's a super fun project. If you missed that, it was this little guy right here, this little outfit. All right, and we used the button foot to attach these eyes. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for coming. Please share your projects. Please practice your buttons and buttonholes. You can use the hashtag #SingerSewing and hashtag #MakeItWithMichaels. And I will see you next month with another fun class. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.